All right, so as of right now, this webinar is officially being recorded. So with that, we will dive right in and get started. So welcome, folks. This is the City of Cambridge Economic Opportunity and Development Division's How to Use Economic Data for Business Planning webinar. We're excited to welcome you to this particular webinar, and we can't wait to review the data with you today. So first off, just to kind of welcome you and give you a little bit of information about us, the division, as well as who the people are that are going to be leading this webinar today. I'd like to share that we are the, as mentioned, Economic Opportunity and Development Division of the Community Development Department. Our division is committed to building an inclusive and sustainable economy in the city of Cambridge. The division is responsible for a wide range of activities designed to meet the city's need for a vibrant, innovative, diverse, and thriving economic base that ensures economic opportunity for all. The division works at all levels of our economy to support small and micro businesses to grow, promote and strengthen our commercial districts, develop economic development programs and policies to support and empower Cambridge's residents, workforce, and businesses, retain and partner with key industries that drive innovation, job growth, and global competitiveness, and lastly, connect with residents and businesses to economic resources and information. Today, you are being hosted here by myself, Christina Delicio. I'm an economic development specialist, and some of the programs that I work on include the Storefront Improvement Program. It helps businesses pay for improvements to facade, which is often windows, doors, signage, outdoor lighting. I also run a food business incubator program that partially involves a food truck program, as well as some food workshops and trainings about financials, marketing, ServeSafe. And last but not least, I do a lot of work with cannabis business permitting. And with us today also is Sarah Jane Huber. She's our economic development intern. She has recently been doing a load of work around our American Rescue Plan Act, also known as ARPA grants. And pretty soon she's going to be diving into some research as well as some programmatic stuff around business to business networks. This particular webinar that you're joining us for today is part of Women's Business Month. So this business month celebrates, of course, women business owners. It does it every October, and we honor women business owners who are in our local economy through some special events, some webinars and trainings, and some special vending opportunities for women-owned businesses. Our great host, Sarah Jane, is going to put some information into the chat throughout today's webinar, especially for some links that are going to be important for folks that you might want to bookmark later, or stuff that maybe just wasn't super tidy to put on a presentation slide. So one of the things that Sarah Jane has just shared with you all is a direct link to the Women's Business Month news article, which covers a lot of the events and trainings that I just briefly mentioned. Before we continue, we would love a chance to hear a little bit about yourselves. We have the chat feature enabled, and we also have the Q&A feature enabled. And if attendees are comfortable, we would love to find out what your business name is, and maybe just tell us a tiny bit about the products and services that you sell. And if you don't know yet, you can always tell us what type of business you're thinking about opening, just so that we have a little bit of a sense of who might be joining us today. I'll let folks continue to sort of engage in that way as we continue slowly through our presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the agenda is for tonight. So we're going to be using this agenda for talking about the Cambridge Small Business Data Dashboard. And it's important to keep that in mind because before you open a business, you have to gather as much information as possible about costs, customers, and competition. And in this particular webinar, we're going to go step by step through economic data sets that are free and accessible through the City of Cambridge website. One thing that I want to quickly point out is that this webinar is going to go a little bit slower maybe than some of the other trainings that we have used. We are going to be doing a lot of pointing out of where to find information on our website. So in addition to covering the actual content, we're also going to be doing a lot of demonstration of how to work with the tool itself. And last but not least, at the end of this presentation, we are going to share some economic data sets and guides that are not specific to the dashboard, but that are related and can probably be of great help to your business. Before I move on, I'm going to take care of a couple of small housekeeping items. We do this for all of our webinars, and it's pretty handy. Just some notes about how this webinar is going to work. So all attendees are muted and video is not enabled. It's a pretty casual webinar, so if you have kids or pets or are in need of a bathroom break, definitely feel free to take care of whatever needs you have. At the end, we are going to share this presentation deck with anyone who is registered or for anyone who requests it. And the video will also get posted to the Economic Opportunity and Development Division website. As I mentioned, our great colleague Sarah Jane is monitoring the chat and the Q&A feature. And because we're going to be doing a little bit of back-end work with Sarah Jane monitoring questions in the chat and me sort of managing the slides, I'm going to make sure to pause in between slides so that if Sarah Jane needs to unmute herself and draw something to my attention, or if there's any sort of little things that we need to address, we have a chance to do so. If you are having any trouble with the presentation, you can reach out to Sarah Jane by email. We've got her email address here. It's shuber@cambridgema.gov. And you are welcome to call into the Zoom. You can call 929-436-2866 and use meeting ID 821-4554-4538. And last but not least, just to reiterate one more time, we are recording. So if folks have any concerns about that, now might be the time to politely sign off. So with that, I'm going to pause for one quick second just to check in with Sarah Jane, see if there's anything I need to address. Sarah Jane, is everything well?
So I think the chat is disabled. So I think the link I just sent, the Women's Business Month link, may not have gone through. And folks who want to share a little bit about themselves are having trouble doing so. Is that a permissions thing you can change?
That might be a permissions thing that I can change. Let me see what I can work on right now.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you for bringing it to my attention. Okay. I think that what we're going to get stuck with for this one is probably just using the Q&A feature for folks. That chat will not be enabled. Sarah Jane, do you feel like you'll be able to maybe pose questions in that field and folks might be able to see it, or answer in that field and folks would be able to see it?
So I will be able to answer if anyone has specific questions, but unfortunately I can't send out. I can't share those links. So maybe that's something we can follow up with.
Yeah, sounds like it's going to have to be. Thanks for bearing with us, folks. I really appreciate everyone's patience on this one. Thanks, Sarah Jane. Well, let's proceed as we were thinking. We'll at least dive into how to use the dashboard. So the Small Business Data Dashboard. The dashboard is going to display data from the Cambridge local business market in accessible graph, chart, and text formats. And the dashboard is going to help local businesses access business climate data, including major business costs, customer-based demographics, development indicators, and more. And in this particular webinar, we're going to take a look at some of the specific data sets in the dashboard. We're going to be looking at the community profile data set, the market advantages data set, the workforce advantages data set, and the industry insights data sets. We wanted to do this webinar because the dashboard is a really powerful tool, and we have found that for a lot of our folks that we work with, just finding the dashboard is a little bit tricky. And then figuring out navigation within the dashboard is sometimes maybe not as intuitive as we would like for some of the data sets. So we're going to start off with some really simple stuff like where to just find the dashboard. The easiest way to find the small business dashboard is to start on the Economic Opportunity and Development Division homepage. Later on, we can share out with folks what that page is, but we did capture it a little bit here in our screenshot. If folks go to cambridgema.gov/CDD/Economic Opportunity and Development, it will take you to our homepage. And in the middle of the homepage, you'll see a dark blue box with some white print that says Explore the Cambridge Small Business Dashboard. And on our screen, it might be a little bit light, but you can also see that there is a pale blue link right below that says View the Cambridge Economic Data. Our slide, we have that pointed out with a bright red arrow so that folks don't miss it. That's the link that we're going to click to actually get to the dashboard itself. So when you actually click on that link, you're going to be taken to a different section of the city's website. This tool is actually hosted not exactly on the Economic Opportunity and Development Division's website. Here I've pasted a screenshot so that folks know if they've navigated to the right spot once they've done that first click. This page may load very large for some folks who are using a desktop computer. So what you see on your screen may look a little bit different than what we are showing you here. But when you arrive on the main page, what you can do is just scroll down a tiny bit until you see 6 colored squares. You'll hear me refer to them as tiles. And each tile will have a different name. They are Logistics Advantage, Community Profile, Market Advantages, Workforce Advantages, Industry Insights, and Talent Pipeline Advantages. On this page, we can click on each one of these tiles to access the maps and charts and interactive tools that we're going to explore together. And on our slide here, you can see where we're pointing out the tiles that you can actually click on. We're using a red arrow to demonstrate that. So one of the things that we will suggest for later on, and we can send this all out by email. Thanks for bearing with us, folks. The page that you can use to find this particular dashboard is located in a different part of the city's website. It's in the service pages area. That website is www.cambridgema.gov/I-want-to/access market research and understand the city's business climate. So if folks ever end up navigating there, you might bookmark that page for later use. So the first data set that we're going to explore together is industry insights. And if folks are looking at the 6 tiles, you can see that it's in the middle bottom row of the 6 options. Industry insights. So when we click the Industry Insights tile, we're taken to a new page, and folks should be seeing a big picture in the middle and some tabs on the left. And you should also see a kind of blue purple box in the middle of the screen that says search for an industry. We're going to walk you through how to search for an industry and the kind of information that you can get that's specific to you. So I'm going to encourage folks who are following along at home to click that box. Here we're pointing out which one to click with a red arrow. So when you click that box, you're going to come to a screen that will open up. It'll be a new search field, and we pasted a screenshot so you can see here what should be on your screen now. And we're going to get into the features of the data dashboard that are in a lot of ways the most interesting. This dashboard is really highly customized, which is a great asset for folks. So we're going to pick an example and we'll walk folks through it. You can see that in the top of this new search box that came up, there's a little looking glass icon. And if you click next to it and start typing in, you can look up your business or your industry. When you click enter, it should bring up your industry or at least something close to it. I'll show you what our example looks like. So when we did our test run, we decided to take a look at information about opening a cafe. And when I entered cafe, the dashboard gave me a few different prompts. And you can see that of the three that are listed, cafe isn't in the list, but coffee shops, beverage, and snack bars is. And that's what I want. So I'm going to go and click on that third bottom option. So once we've selected our industry from the prompts, we're then immediately taken to the next tab, which is called Trends. And already we can see that there's some interesting data here. On this page, we have about 5 charts or grids, and we're going to look at a couple of select ones. So the upper left-hand chart shows employment by industry. And for cafes, I can see that employment in Massachusetts, which is marked by that blue line, has been steadily going up. And I can also see that for the US, which is denoted by a green line, it's been going up as well and maybe even surpassing Massachusetts. And I also noticed that in the chart in the lower right-hand corner that there's average annual wages. It's been going up, but wages for cafe workers appear lower in the US comparatively. So for me, this is already kind of interesting information. If I'm thinking about my cafe and about hiring, it might be really helpful for me to know that the wages are going to be a little bit higher in Massachusetts compared with the rest of the state. If by chance some of the people that I'm looking to hire are coming from a different state, I might want to already be thinking about how I'm going to talk to my prospective hires about the potential difference in wages that are being offered. So before we move on, we're going to talk about just a couple, I'll say like pro tips for how to manage the small business data dashboard. If we look closer at the charts that I just referenced, the one that's in the lower right-hand corner talking about wages, you can see that I moused over the graph. And when I do that, there's some specific information for each year that gets brought up. And so let's talk through a little bit about why that specific information might matter. It might be a little hard to see on the screen, but that white box is telling us that average annual wages in 2016 was just about $17,500 for Massachusetts residents. And let's assume that I'm expecting my cafe to open up 2 years from now. If I want to project how much the average annual wage rates might go up 2 years from now, I can just look at this data and compare the increase year over year. So let's guess that on average, the wages increase $2,000 more or less each year. That will help me budget an additional $4,000 above the information that I'm seeing for the final year of data presented here. That way my budget is not underestimating by accident. Additionally, you can click on the 3 dots that are shown for any chart to see the data source. The 3 dots are always in the upper right-hand corner of each chart or graph. And lastly, just a little tip, you can save all of these charts as images. I'll be sharing a story in a little bit about why that feature might be valuable, but wanted to point out now that all this information can be saved. So let's move on to benchmarks. Excuse me. The next tab here in Industry Insights. On our slide, we're pointing out the box to click with a red arrow. In the Industry Insights dataset, the tabs that are along the left-hand side are all going to present information about the specific industry you picked, and the dashboard is going to remember what you entered. So when we click on the benchmarks, it's going to show us data for cafes. We don't have to search again or re-enter that info. So when we go ahead and click benchmarks, again, that third tab down on the left-hand side, you'll see that coffee shops, beverages, and snack bar is selected and has been preserved. And there's now 3 new subsections of benchmarks for us to view. We see something called profitability and debt, something called total expenses, and something called financial ratios. Now, the text is a little bit light on this slide, so we're pointing out these 3 subsections with a red arrow. When we first get to the benchmarks tab, the profitability and debt subsection is already selected, but I've jumped us ahead to the total expenses section because I think it's a particularly helpful chart. If folks haven't already, you might want to go ahead and click total expenses on the spot where our slide points out. And when we take a look here, we can see that for a cafe, the primary expense is going to be the cost of goods sold, and that's going to account for nearly half of our expenses. That might seem sort of obvious for a cafe, but for some other industries, the expenses may not be as easy to anticipate. It's also really helpful to know the percentages of these costs so that I can prioritize my spending and think about my budget in a detailed and balanced way. Like before, you can see that I've moused over some of the smaller blocks to bring forward some hidden information. So for example, it looks like repairs could account for 1.5% of my costs. That's very helpful information because as I'm projecting 3 years out, 5 years out, I'm going to want to be thinking about my repairs and maybe even my depreciating equipment. So by now you can probably tell that I'm a super fan of the data dashboard, and you can spend a lot of time clicking through all the tabs and the subsections and the charts. And with that in mind, I'm going to point out that a whole other benchmark subsection is here called financial ratios that we didn't even touch on, and that I'll encourage folks to just explore on their own. I promise that we'll move on from industry insights in just a moment. But before we do, I want to point out this last subsection called location. It has a great mapping tool. Let's click on that subsection if folks haven't already. And you can see that here on our slide, we're pointing out which one to click with a red arrow. So when we click on location, we're brought to a map that's going to look like the one that we've got here in our screen grab. So let's talk through this data a little bit. Let's assume that I have a pretty good idea of where I want my business to be located in Cambridge. For our purposes, let's say that I've decided that Cambridge Street would be an ideal spot for me. I probably want to know if there are going to be a lot or a high concentration of cafes already on or around Cambridge Street. And this map is going to show us that exact information. So this map, just right off the bat, is telling us that the entire area that's in our view has 441 cafes in it. You should see that there's a white box up at the top left-hand side of the map showing that number of 441. There's a zoom in and a zoom out feature in the upper right-hand corner of the map, so you can get in a little closer if you'd like. And you can also see that the map is essentially acting like a kind of heat index. It's showing us that the lightest colored blocks have 0 cafes and the darkest red blocks have as much as 41 cafes. I need to check what those shapes are. That's my homework after this project. I think they could be wards or districts, but for the purpose of this webinar, I'm just going to refer to them as zones. Oops, sorry, going back. Oh no, other way. Sorry, everybody. Location still. What I like best about this map is that you can click on any of those zones, and for more information, it will pop up and show you exactly how many cafes or whatever other kind of business you might be searching for are in the zone that you clicked. So you might see I've already gone ahead and clicked one of the zones that is near a part of Cambridge Street that I'm considering for my cafe. If folks look at the middle of our screenshot, you can see that there's a white box and it says Target Business 2. That means that there are 2 cafes in that zone. If you don't see one of those white boxes on your own screen, you might just click any one of these zones and it will show you how many cafes are in that particular zone. This is really helpful because now I don't have to guess exactly how many cafes might be between 0 and 41 for the particular zone that I'm looking at. And for me, this is really helpful because even if you think that you kind of know an area pretty well, it's going to give you a chance to kind of test your assumptions to find out, like, if you think there's a lot of cafes, just how many a lot might be. So for folks following along, one quick note before we proceed to the next data set. We're going to be sort of following along with my cafe example, and we're going to return to my target zone when we explore some other data sets. So specifically, we're going to take a look again at that zone, and we're going to talk a little bit more about cafe stuff. And with that all in mind, let's kind of follow along to see how this looks in a whole different data set. What folks might see when they X out or use the back button to get out of a data set is that it's going to always bring us back to this main page. So on this main page, we can hop around from tile to tile. And the next tile that we're going to look at is the one that's called Market Advantages. It's a data set that's going to help us figure out where our customers might be. And on your screen, it should be the tile that's on the top row, the right-hand side. So for Market Advantages, as soon as we click it, we are brought right into the data set. And unlike the previous data set, this section does not present information by industry, but that's okay because it's not what we want here anyways. We're going to get demographic information about the potential customers in our area. Like the industry insights data set, here we have some tabs on the left-hand side. You can see that we are already in the local consumers tab. It's already been selected for us. Also on this slide, you can see that a subsection that we're already on is called individual income. This heat map is showing us how many residents of a certain income bracket are concentrated in an area. A lighter color is going to mean fewer residents and a darker color is going to mean more. Here you can see I've clicked on that same zone from before where I learned that there were only 2 cafes. And on this particular map, I can see that the residents that I'm targeting, which happen to be those residents who have an income of between $35,000 and $75,000 a year, that there's kind of a medium level of concentration for my particular target zone. That seems pretty promising for my business. Before we move on, there are just some tips that I want to point out on this section. Here you can see that there's kind of a little slide bar for the individual income subsection. It allows you to adjust the range that is presented in the map. So you can play around with dragging the 2 ends of the barbell. And when you do that, you should see that the data changes in real time on the map. On our slide here, we're pointing out where the barbell is so that you can click and adjust it. And also, like in the other map, you can see that I clicked on one of those colored zones in the map and it's opened up a white box with some specific information. So here you can see that there are 2,544 residents who earn between 35,000, 75,000 just in that one colored zone where I'm thinking of putting my cafe. We've covered a good amount of information so far, so I want to take a brief moment to pause and just check in with Sarah Jane. Sarah Jane, is there anything that should be raised now or brought to my attention?
No more questions right now.
Sweet, thank you so much. Let's continue on. So local businesses. If we were looking before at where residents are located, residents are, of course, just going to be one portion of my customers. I'm going to want to see where workers are too, because I'm thinking that they're going to also want to come to my super awesome cafe. But let's find out. On our slide here, we're pointing out the different subsection to click with a little red arrow. Sorry, it's this one right here. This arrow is pointing out where to click for local businesses. And when you do click that, it'll bring you to this screen. This is the screen for local businesses information under Market Advantages. It's going to help us see like what kind of businesses are around us. So for my example with my cafe, I was thinking that I wanted to see what kind of healthcare workers might be in my area. Um, and there's a long list of business types, and you can select or deselect them. Pardon me, folks. My slides jumped around on me. Here we go. So sorry, pardon me. Under local businesses, you can see there's a lot of different options that you can select or deselect. And one thing to just sort of bear in mind is that when you first arrive at this page, some of the options are going to already be selected for you. So before you even start choosing which things you want to see information about, it's worth it to clear the field. So you can do that by clicking the None button, which will wipe out anything that was preserved just by the dashboard itself. And then you can start going in and selecting the individual businesses that you want more information about. On my screen, you can see that I've already clicked the toggle for healthcare and social assistance. And just like the previous section, we have a heat map showing us a concentration. So for where we're looking, it's a slightly lower concentration, but we do have some darker shaded areas kind of right around where our proposed zone is. So this is still really helpful information for me to be taking into account. And I want to sort of linger on this information for just a minute before we continue on, because there's some sort of scenarios to like tease out. So obviously all this information is helping me figure out like a detailed business plan, and it's helping me think through lots of different scenarios. But what are some of those scenarios? So if I'm thinking that I might want to cater to healthcare workers, one of the things that might come up for me is that I might be rethinking my hours of operation. So when I first started, maybe I was certain that I would have a cafe that is open early in the morning from 7 and I'm going to be closed at 1 o'clock. But if I'm finding out that there's actually a good amount of healthcare workers right around me, it might be worth it for me to have a break in the middle of the day and maybe have some hours of operation a little later at night when there maybe are only just restaurants open. Healthcare workers might be in need of a quick snack or some late night coffee, and my business could potentially be a really good source for that. And that might be something for me to think through. And that's not information that I maybe would have thought of on my own if I hadn't been thinking through the possibility that there would be so many potential healthcare workers in the area. Another reason to sort of think about why this data could be helpful, I had mentioned before that all of these charts and graphs can be saved. And I want to share a story about a business that I got to help in a previous job. That business was a local gym, independently owned by two women of color. And they had a great business concept and they really knew their stuff. And they wanted to stay open 24 hours a day. But in order to stay open for 24 hours a day, you have to get permission from the planning board. At least that was the case for the city where this situation happened. And when they go before the planning board, they have to make a case for why they're asking for the thing that they're asking permission for. And when they explained why the 24-hour access was so important to their customers, they said that they have many healthcare residents who use their gym at kind of strange hours because the workers have like off-peak hours in their regular jobs. So if those women had had access to this data tool, they could have performed all the searches that we just did. They could have saved all the charts and graphs as pictures, and they could have added it to their presentation to the planning board. And that's a pretty powerful story to be able to tell. Obviously, those women and every other person who goes into business knows their stuff and is an expert in their field. And this tool is just one more way to help you communicate the things that you're thinking about for your business and for your future. So with that in mind, let's go take a look at how some of these other data sets are going to give us even more information. So let's go back to the home page. We get here by Xing out or by just using the back button. And the next thing that we're going to dive into is workforce advantages. That is a data set that helps us figure out where employees might be. For you all, you might see that it's the tile that's in the bottom row on the left-hand side. Like the previous data set, workforce advantages does not filter information by industry or type of business that we want to open, but that's going to be okay. Here we're going to get some demographic information about the potential employees in our target area. And let's take a moment to just talk through why this data set might be helpful for a variety of businesses who are at every stage. For some folks, your first hire might feel like a very long way off, and it might be hard to think concretely about hiring. But like our previous examples, I'm going to want to see where some healthcare employees are in my area, and I'm going to want to know more about them so that I can treat them as potential customers, as opposed to treating them as a workforce that I want to hire. So this data set is going to be helpful for anyone that wants to think of customers or wanting to think of people that are going to ultimately join your employment team. When we first click on workforce advantages, we're going to get taken to the slide that we're looking at right now called indicators. And it's a nice snapshot of just sort of the general state of the workforce in Cambridge. So at a quick look, I can see that there are healthcare workers representing the third highest industry of employment. That's the yellow box that's showing up at the bottom. I can see that there are 8,178 Cambridge residents, in healthcare. And since I'm curious about healthcare workers as a potential customer base, that seems pretty promising as a number, but I'm going to want to look closer. And the way that I can look closer is by looking at the Catchment tab. You should see it on the left-hand side of your screen under the Indicators tab. That's on a spot where all of our other tabs have been located. So we're going to go ahead and click Catchment and move on to a little bit of a closer dive into the data set. When we click Catchment, we're brought to another heat map. And for me, I'm thinking about those 8,178 Cambridge residences in healthcare, and I want to know more about where they live exactly, because Cambridge is not the biggest city, but it's definitely big enough where if a concentration of healthcare workers are living in the part of the city that's really far away from me and kind of on the opposite side, I don't know if realistically they're going to be a customer base for me. So I want to know more about where they are. I think that this map is awesome. All the heat maps are great, but I think this one's really cool. On the left-hand side, you can see that there's a lot of features to help customize your search. When you first enter this data set, the education type subsection is already what's sort of enabled and presenting. So if you are following along at home and you just clicked on the Catchment tab, your screen might look different from what I'm showing you here. So if by chance you are doing a search for employees and you're interested in where people have certain levels of education, where they might be living in Cambridge, that section will be very helpful for you. But I've already advanced us to the next section called occupation type. And we've pointed out that subsection with a red arrow here so that you can see the difference that I'm talking about. Like some other sections, when you first navigate here, there's going to be some fields that are already selected for you. So again, it's helpful to kind of do a quick scan through and make sure if there's anything that's been preserved from a previous search or from what the dashboard is just trying to highlight for you, and then go in and actually select the things that you want to take a look at. So in my case here, you can see that on the screen grab, I've already highlighted that section, and I want healthcare practitioners and technical, as well as those in healthcare support. And when I select those, this is the map that I get. I can see that there's a decent spread actually across the city of Cambridge. And I can see that there are some concentrations in other cities and towns near me as well. On this map, the lighter color represents less people, and the darker colors represent more. So if I'm looking at high concentrations around me and in other cities, I might even start considering what kinds of goods or services I should offer for people who might be commuting from another city into Cambridge. So with that in mind, we're going to look at one last bit of information in the dashboard. We're going to X out or use the back button to get back to that main page. Here, the final data set that we're going to look at is called Community Profile. Community Profile gives us information about the city of Cambridge kind of as a whole. Let's go ahead and click on that one. Folks, you'll see that it's the middle tile on the upper row. Like others, when we click on Community Profile, we are taken right into the data set. This is another data set where we're not going to be allowed to search by industry. But again, that's not the type of information we want here. So this is actually already set up to be helpful for us. You can see that there's a lot of tabs on this particular data set. There's tabs on the left-hand side that say economic, resident, household, dwelling, construction, workforce, livability. For our purposes, I thought it would be helpful to highlight the resident tab. And you can see here that I get a kind of snapshot of the residences of Cambridge. I can see that there's 117,000 residents. And for the first time, it seems like maybe the population has gone down a little. And I can see that income per person is 61,000 and that has been kind of steadily going up. The median age is 30.6 years. And I can see that the largest group is those who are ages 20 to 29. So just knowing those statistics is already helpful for me. For example, like I might be thinking about the fact that young people in the city of Cambridge, maybe they don't yet have a favorite coffee shop. Like maybe that's a chance for me to actually move in and become somebody's first new favorite coffee shop of the city. So just knowing that demographic exists could be really helpful to me. But we're still thinking about those hospital workers. So it would be really interesting to see if those residents around my target area might be older or younger. That might help me think through how I actually target them. So I want to quickly point out here, we have another barbell slide scale that's going to allow us to adjust the different age groups. This one, I think I highlighted to take a look and see where there might be people between the ages of 30 and 59. For me, this was kind of interesting to take a look at because I was kind of thinking, all right, in the city of Cambridge, where does this age group more or less concentrate? And for my purposes, it could be kind of interesting to know because that might change the kind of advertising I do to those groups of people, right? Like it might mean that maybe I'm not doing a lot of social media advertising. Maybe I would do some actual drop flyers or maybe do some other printed material. And it's also interesting for me to think about because maybe it's possible that those people are sort of in like a middle or at an established stage of their career. It's of course not guaranteed because folks are obviously changing jobs all the time now, and there's lots of different factors that go into where somebody is in their job or in their sort of stage of life. But this might be starting to help paint a picture for me about where my target group of customers, whether they're residents or whether they're workers, might be living in the city. So if we X out, we're brought back to the main page. This is the part where we're going to look no further because we've covered heaps. And I want to be conscientious about time and make sure that we're able to address people's concerns or questions and also share some more resources at the end. I'll pause here just to point out that there are other tiles that we didn't get to, that we didn't explore in this webinar. Folks would be encouraged, of course, to explore on their own. Certainly get in touch with myself or anybody else on the Economic Opportunity and Development Division team if we can be helpful with offering a one-on-one training of this dashboard or addressing any questions. And the last little thing that I will sort of bring to folks' attention is just some information about other resources. As Sarah Jane mentioned, we can share this out at another time. We have a retail strategy plan. It was from 2017, so it's a tiny bit dated, but I think there's still some really good information in it about customer profiles, which can help thinking through how to target things specifically to certain folks. And we have wonderful business permitting guides. Those guides review common permitting and licensing needs for a variety of businesses, and we have many of them available in languages other than English. And lastly, we have wonderful commercial district market profiles. We gather a lot of really specific demographic information about these areas, and they can be a great complement to the work that we just did here on the Small Business Data Dashboard. And last but not least, for those of you that might be really hardcore data nerds, there is an entire section of the Community Development Department's website dedicated to just facts and data, located at cambridgema.gov/CDD/facts and maps. Some of the information on that site is going to be really raw. Like it's going to be data that is just bulk information and has not been compiled or maybe put into a synthesized version like the dashboard that we just went through together. But there is a lot there to work with and really, really helpful information for a variety of needs. If folks would like, we welcome contact of all kinds. We've got email addresses here and phone numbers for everyone on the team. So as mentioned earlier, I'm Christina Delicio. I would be happy to chat with anyone anytime about any of the stuff we cover here. And Sarah Jane Huber is also available here with contact information. I would be remiss if I didn't share information about the other great people on our team. Pardeep Safari is our Director of Economic Opportunity and Development. Allison Allen is our Senior Economic Development Manager. Lola Campos is our Economic Development Specialist. And Rana Abrams is our Administrative Assistant. Together, we cover a wide range of expertise and interests. So one of us is bound to be able to help you with whatever questions you might have about your business. So since we are now at the end, I'm going to stop sharing and check in with my friend Sarah Jane because we have a few minutes left and see if there's anything that I can be helpful with or address. Thank you for everything, Sarah Jane.
Hi, yeah. So we have one question. Is curious whether a speech therapy biz can be operated in residential B zone.
Ooh, that's a great question. Let me dig up contact information for that person because one of the things that I did not include in this presentation, but I was really tempted to include was information about how to read the zoning code. So the tricky answer about the zoning code is that the city has maps and you can look at a map and you can say like, okay, it looks as if my type of business might be allowed in that space. But then sometimes there are mitigating factors like overlay districts or different permissions that were granted to a business maybe before the spot that you're thinking about. So it's often best to connect with one of the specialists who are in our zoning division because they can help answer for sure whether or not a business is allowed in the particular zone that someone might be thinking about. I know for home-based businesses, for people that want to operate out of their homes or in their residences, that there are some special considerations with that. So if by chance this person felt like they could share their contact information with you, or if they want to just contact me and I can help follow up with them offline, I'd be happy to help with that. Any other questions, Sarah Jane? It sounded like that was the only one.
That's it so far.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate everyone bearing with me as I toggled through many slides and as we figured out chat versus Q&A features. Thank you everyone for joining us for this particular webinar and for all of your patience. I think unless there's anything else that has come in, I think we're okay to probably sign off, Sarah Jane.
No more questions.
All right. Thank you again, everyone. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of the month celebrating Women's Business Month. I want to thank my colleague again, Sarah Jane, for all of her help and for rolling with the unexpected technical difficulties today. Thank you, Sarah Jane. And a big shout out and thanks to the team here at Economic Opportunity and Development. They're a great crew to work with, and we're very, very lucky. So I'm going to end it. Thanks, folks. Hope to see you at something else very, very soon. Bye now.